The Ethiopian Civil War. The flames of war in the Ethiopian province of Tigray may burn the neighborhood. The bone-breaking war between Addis Ababa and Mekele has no end in sight. The Italian Orientalist Carlo Conti Rossini called Ethiopia the Museum of Peoples, due to the great diversity of the country's population, which consists of about 100 ethnic and cultural groups that speak a range of Semitic and Cushitic languages, the largest and most famous of which are the Oromo, Amhara, Tigray, and Somala nationalities. The peoples of Ethiopia have coexisted for long periods within the closed state that does not have sea borders, and enjoys relative freedom within the federal state. However, the situation in Addis Ababa and the political conflict have transformed diversity from a blessing into a flammable trigger at any moment, between groups. The major dominant ones, Oromo, Amhara, and Tigrayans. In 1995 the government of the People's Liberation Front for the Liberation of Ethiopia divided Ethiopia into 9 states, according to the Ethiopian constitution, namely Afar, Amhara, Banishan, Gulcams, Gambela, Harar, Oromia, Somalia, and the southern nations, in addition to the cities of Addis Ababa, the capital, and Dawa Monastery, which enjoy a special status within the Ethiopian Federation. The Ethiopian constitution stipulates the right of nations, nationalities, and peoples to self-determination and to administer each ethnicity of its internal affairs, including language and cultural identity, while ensuring the right of ethnic groups to separate from the state, as it is a last option to resort to if the state fails to address political and economic discrimination, and that it is achieved democratically by voting in the National Legislative Council, Parliament. Ethiopia is governed by a political alliance in the name of the Revolutionary Democratic Front for the Ethiopian Peoples. It was formed in the year 1991 of the Oromo People's Democratic Organization, the Amhara National Democratic Movement, the Southern Ethiopian People's Democratic Movement and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. Before the formation of the alliance, these groups were rebel groups against the Marxist-oriented regime known as the Derg regime led by President Mengistu Haile Mariam, who had ruled the country since 1974 after the rule of Emperor Haile Selassie was overthrown, until the new alliance overthrew him in the year of its formation, 1991. At that time, the rebels entered the capital Addis Ababa and Mengistu fled the country. With the fall of Mengistu's rule, the ruling coalition formed a transitional government headed by Tamrat Laney, which continued in power until August 22, 1995. Based on the new constitution that was written in 1994, a bicameral legislature and a judicial system were formed, after which the country witnessed its first multi-party elections. In those elections, the candidate of the Ethiopian People's Democratic Front coalition, Meles Zenawi, who is of Tigrayan nationality, won as Prime Minister, and Nikasewel as head of state. Zenawi remained in power until his death August 20, 2012. Following the death of Zenawi, Deputy Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn became Prime Minister and remained in office until his election as Prime Minister in the 2015 elections. The alliance cracked. Abdelmunim Abu Idris, an expert on the affairs of the Horn of Africa, dates the beginning of the cracking of the ruling coalition in Ethiopia to the few years that followed the entry of the coalition forces to the capital Addis Ababa and the defeat of Mengistu Haile Mariam. He says, the conflict began with the restlessness of the Oromo nationalism from what they called marginalization within the authority and the alliance governor, but they controlled him until 2005, when the Democratic Front for the Oromo People faction accused the coalition of rigging the elections and extracting 2 electoral districts in Addis Ababa from them, but Prime Minister Meles Zenawi succeeded in calming them down. Abu Idris continues, saying, the Oromo immigrants, led by Jawhar Muhammad, have been chanting the tone of marginalization, claiming that they represent 40% of the total population. Nevertheless, their percentage in power is only 6%, while the Tigrayans have 25% of the power. That their number does not exceed 6% of the total population. He explains that the tone of marginalization remained muted, however, until the famous Oromo leader, Jawhar Muhammad, established a radio station in the Oromo language broadcast from the United States and sharply addressed the issue of their marginalization, and then the matter came out more publicly after the death of Zenawi. Indeed, the Oromo escalated the campaigns against the Tigrayans' control that had extended since 1991, until the ruling coalition reached a settlement that decided to appoint a non-Tigray prime minister, and Haile Mariam Desalegn, who belonged to the Southern People's Front group, after the death of Zenawi, was chosen accordingly. It becomes easier for the Tigray to control him and win his group a new ally. Oromo protests. However, the situation was complicated by the government's issuance in 2015 of decisions to grant lands to investors in the Oromo region and expand the area of the capital, Addis Ababa, located in the region, at the expense of Oromia to the south, and since that date, the famous series of protests began in 2016 and 2017 led by Jawhar Muhammad, and the government of Desalegn suppressed them with remarkable violence. Abu Idris believes that the government violence against the protests led to the emergence of an alliance between the Oromo and Amhara nationalities, despite the ethnic differences between the two groups. Hence, this coalition exerted violent pressure on the Desalegn government, exploiting its management of the popular protests and violently suppressing them, and his failure to achieve balanced development, so he was forced to resign. He adds, Desalegn resigned, and Abiy Ahmed, from the Oromo, was chosen as Prime Minister with the support of the Oromo Alliance and the Amhara with a majority of 75% of the ruling coalition, but the Tigrayans withheld their 25% votes from him, and since that time the man kept, or so observers say, their rejection support him at first. Abiy Ahmed and Tigray. Abiy Ahmed laid down economic reform plans that were highly welcomed worldwide, but they hit the centers of Tigrayan control in the security and military services, as they considered them historically repressive and does not believe in democracy. Then, the confrontation erupted between Addis Ababa and Mekele, the capital of Tigray region, with Abe dismissing the Ethiopian Army Chief of Staff Yunus Amora, the Director of the Security and Intelligence Service, the Director of Police, and the Director of the Federal Police, all of whom were from the Tigrayans, and he brought in a Chief of Staff from the Amhara, and a Director for the security apparatus of the Oromo. He also sacked the Director of the Renaissance Dam, dealing a big blow to the Tigrayans, as the main company that was importing construction materials for the dam was related to the Popular Front for the Tigrayan People, which was considered by the Tigrayans as a direct target for them. Abe also hastened to reconcile with the president of Eritrea, Isaias Afwerki, the historical enemy of Tigrayans, and here he explains that Afwerki was an ally of Tigrayans, before the alliance turned into hostility after the 1998 Ethiopian-Eritrean War. As a result, the Tigrayans began to organize themselves internally, leaned on their territory since the Ethiopian-Eritrean reconciliation, and launched a violent attack on the first-row men in Addis Ababa, such as Seum Mizifan and his group. After they rearranged their inner home, they brought the famous fighter and warrior person Mikhail to head the Tigrayan People Front, then as governor of the region. The crisis of extending the mandate of Abiy Ahmed. The great catastrophe came when the federal parliament extended the term of Abiy Ahmed, which ended last June, under the pretext of the COVID-19 pandemic, which the Tigrayans considered an unconstitutional and illegal measure. In a celebration commemorating the founding of the Tigrayan People Front in the provincial capital, the city of Mekele, the region restored its old flag as an alternative to the flag of Ethiopia. Meanwhile, the President of the Federal Parliament, Soraya Ibrahim, announced her refusal to postpone the elections, describing them as unconstitutional, and declared her abstention in participating in violating the constitution, and then decided to stay in Tigray and not return to Addis Ababa again. The regional parliament decided to hold its elections in August 2020. However, the Central Elections Commission refused to supervise and recognize it, and the government refused to recognize it. They responded likewise to withdraw recognition of the central government in Addis Ababa, describing it as lacking legitimacy. According to Abu Idris, in response to those events, the Prime Minister issued a decision to stop financial transfers to the Tigray region, and the Central Bank of Ethiopia ordered to stop transfers to bank branches in the region, and then took another decision to implement the decision of the International Court of Justice to hand over Badme and Zalmza regions to Eritrea, which are located within the Tigray region. The Tigrayans' response was to prevent the retreating soldiers from their region from surrendering their weapons, and to require them to leave all military equipment behind. Then, events escalated, culminating in the prevention of the commander of the Northern Sector Forces of the Ethiopian Army, with the rank of Lieutenant General, from assuming command of the force and arresting him. Then the Tigrayans attacked the Northern Sector Forces and took control of it, along with the 5th Armored Division, affiliated with the Federal Army, and at the border points with Sudan, Hamra, Al-Lukbi, Mekele and Addis Ababa War. On November 2, the Federal Ethiopian Forces, supported by the forces of the Amhara region, launched an attack on the Tigrayan forces using aviation and artillery. The Tigrayans launched a counter-attack on the Abd al-Rafi region of the Amhara region near the Sudanese border, thinking that it was a weak point, but the Amhara forces responded. The Tigrayans threatened to respond with surface-to-surface missiles, with a range of 300,000 kilometers, in the possession of their forces. Abu Idris believes that the Ethiopian army will not be able to defeat the Tigrayan forces in their rugged area, because in addition to the large force that they possess, which amounts to 250,000 fighters backed by Tigray militia and veterans, their forces have great experience in fighting and warfare. On the other hand, the federal forces do not have sufficient knowledge of the topography of the region's geography. Therefore, the Ethiopian army can carry out air strikes, but it will not be able to do anything on the ground. The expert also explains that Sudan and Eritrea in particular will be affected by the armed conflict in the Tigray region. Tigrayans could attack the Eritrean capital Asmara, according to their declaration of war. The Tigrayans are now seeking to neutralize the Eritrean army and the people of Eritrea. They said that they are targeting the ruling party in Eritrea, i.e., the Eritrean Popular Front for the Liberation of Eritrea, led by Isaias Afwerki, and if Isaias tries to intervene in favor of his ally Abiy Ahmed, the Tigrayans may turn to strike Eritrea. The expert on Horn of Africa affairs warns of the security effects of the conflict on Sudan as well, saying, "The border areas are already turbulent, and gangs and militias, in particular, the unreliable Edge militia, are practicing in them the arms trade, people smuggling and trafficking in people and drugs, and thus, the conflict leads to large flows of refugees, all heading towards Sudan. Abu Idris considers what he called Abiy Ahmed's adventure tantamount to a man's political suicide. The options are narrowing him down, and by his refusal to mediate the African Union and the IGAD group of countries, Abiy Ahmed has lost the opportunity to settle the conflict, allowing him to continue the elections and create new alliances. He continues that Abiy Ahmed's position is weak, even among his Oromo nationalities, because of his arrest of its symbols, the most famous of whom is Jawhar Muhammad, and the practice of severe violence against them by the central authority. Abiy Ahmed did not leave himself options other than war, despite its danger to his political future, and perhaps his life. Rather, he put the future of Ethiopia itself at stake. Al-Nada Dam. Finally, Abu Idris excludes that the war will affect the Renaissance Dam because it is 650 kilometers away from the conflict zone, in addition to the fact that it is not Abiy Ahmed's project, but rather planned by the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, who Tigray considers a great symbol for them. And he adds, but Abiy Ahmed will be more strict about the issue of the Renaissance Dam and will work to complete it, so that he will be his project that seeks to unite the Ethiopians behind it, while the Tigrayans will not strike the Renaissance Dam because it is not Abiy Ahmed's project, but rather an Ethiopian national project. On the other hand, it is feared that the conflict in the Tigray region leads to a renewed conflict between the Amhara and Tigrayans over the sovereignty of Ethiopia, as the Amhara see in it a historic opportunity to restore the power they lost since the end of the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie, while the Tigrayans see in it the opportunity to impose their logic and influence by force. Panorama of the Nationalities of Ethiopia Museum of Peoples. The coexistence of large numbers of nationalities, tribes, ethnicities, religious beliefs, and cultures, since ancient history in Ethiopia, the region known historically as Abyssinia. It is a landlocked closed state, bordered on the west by Sudan and South Sudan, on the north by Djibouti and Eritrea, on the east by Somalia, and on the south by Kenya. The Oromo people are the largest nationalities in the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, with nearly or more than 40 million people, and they constitute 39% of Ethiopia's population. The Oromo belong to the Cushitic group of peoples, and they live in the Oromia region, central Ethiopia, and on top of the Ethiopian plateau. After the rule of dictator Mengistu Haile Mariam was overthrown, the region was self-governed. It has its capital, Nazareth, and its old name is Adama. It is bordered by the Afar, Amhara, Banishan and Kenyan borders from the south, and the Somali region, with the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa located in the middle. As for the Amhara people, they live in northern Ethiopia, and their percentage of the population is estimated at about 25%, including the rulers of the historical Ethiopian Empire, and among their most prominent leaders in the modern era are Emperor Haile Selassie, his predecessor, Emperor Menelik, and the famous dictator Mengistu Haile Mariam. The Amhara nationality dominates the country culturally and politically, while the Amhara language is one of the Semitic languages, and it is the official language in the Federal Republic of Ethiopia. The Tigrayans do not make up a large proportion of the total population of Ethiopia, as their proportion is only 6.1%. The Tigrayans live in the north of the country near the border with Eritrea. Nevertheless, this nationalism has ruled Ethiopia since the victory of the Ethiopian Revolution and the overthrow of the Derg regime headed by Mengistu, and the presidency of Meles Zenawi in 1991. Despite the Prime Minister's assumption of leaders from other nationalities, in addition to the political authority, the majority of the Ethiopian army, individuals, and officers belonging to Tigrayans, played the Popular Front for the Liberation of Tigrayans and its leader, Zenawi, a pivotal role in bringing down the Mengistu regime, and reversed the political scene, and the leadership of the country moved from Amhara to Tigray. The Ogaden region, in the east, is a stronghold of the group known as Somala Nationalism. Their number is estimated at about 6.2% of the population of the region that Ethiopia annexed to it in 1954. These belong to the Somali ethnicities, the most important of which is the Ogaden tribe, which are branches of the Somali Darid tribe, the Danakil tribe, and some Arab races coming across the Red Sea via Somalia. As for the southern nations region, dozens of peoples and tribes live, the most famous of which are the Sidama, or Sidamo, Hamitic tribe, and the African states, which is the tribe of the former Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, along with other small tribes such as the Gamu, Morsi, Basquitos, and Kiwava. This region is the largest exporter of the famous Ethiopian coffee, with a population of about 14 million. Finally, in western Ethiopia lies the Banishan Gulcams region. The Banishan Gul are the largest tribes in the region, so they are called by their name. These are a mixture of Sudanese tribes, who speak the Sudanese dialects derived from the Arabic language, and some of them have local dialects such as Alberta, and their region is located in the Renaissance Dam. And the name is derived from the name of the holy mountain in the region, and their numbers, according to a census conducted in 2007, are about 700,000, and they reside in the mountains of Alberta, Gulcams, Amhara, Oromo, Shinasha, and Mau, and the region has a Muslim majority. The truth of the matter is that Ethiopia is a museum of peoples, cultures, customs, and traditions. These customs and traditions differ from one region to another, but between one ethnic group and another, but they are all subject to the Ethiopian Federal Union, and the federal constitution gives these peoples the right to self-determination, to separate, and to form an independent state.